Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to Full Scottish, an hour-long programme of Scottish politics and culture brought to you every week by Broadcasting Scotland. Our guests this morning include the SNP MSP James Dornan, who has announced that he is withdrawing his bid to become SNP Depute Leader. We'll be talking to James about why he's withdrawing and what he's planning to do now. We'll also be talking to Ruth Watson about the Keep Scotland the Brand campaign, and we'll have music from Tommy McGuire. So without further ado, on with the show.
Hi there, good morning, I'm Suzanne McLaughlin, and as Richard just said, on with the show. So as usual, regular guests will know, regular viewers, with all fingers and thumbs today, regular viewers will know we always start the week with our stories of the week. So we're going to turn first of all to Ruth. Ruth, anything that's piqued your interest in papers, radio, TV this week?
I have got this Thursday's copy of The Independent. Charles declares we are all connected as he launches Commonwealth Games. Now, this is looking at the Commonwealth Games on the one level, but on the other level, this is all part of, I believe, this great British Empire to the fact that with this Brexit halcyon era we're about to be welcoming in, Westminster's scrabbling desperately for allies, and what they're hoping is that they're going to be engaging in trade with the Commonwealth. Now, hopefully, they're moving away from the Empire 2 narrative, because I was speaking to some Indian friends about this when it first came out. It was first mooted, and by the time they stopped laughing long enough for me to put the phone back to my ear, and they said, Empire 2, is it? They said, you have no idea how many decades we Indians have been waiting for this moment. So, Commonwealth Games, it's all about sport, that's great, but the more I hear about trade deals with Australia that are going to mean British beef, Scotch beef is going to have infiltrations of Australian beef, which shouldn't be an issue if it wasn't for the fact Australian beef was pumped full of growth hormones. How many other dodgy deals are we going to be expected to accept as part of this new Commonwealth era? The other thing is, has anybody asked how many of these countries have tried really hard to get rid of the British flag out of their flags? Australia and New Zealand, every couple of years, talk about it. The British brand is pretty toxic in the Commonwealth. It's going to be an interesting time ahead.
Although I think in Brexit negotiations that there are some criticism that Britain doesn't seem to be able to recognise that its influence is diminishing and is behaving as if it's still a global power, and clearly that influence is very much less than it was.
Yeah, there's been a number of cases recently where some of these countries that clearly Britain seem to think they have a special relationship have made it clear that that special relationship is it's a figment of Britain's imagination.
Well, it certainly is a special relationship, but it's a special relationship which is where comeuppance comes into play.
Yes.
You know, it's a special relationship where the nasty uncle that gave you a doing every Christmas comes to stay. Comes to stay with you for a week and expects the best hospitality. Yeah, I think the UK is going to get a real lesson in post-colonialist politics.
Yes, I think that Theresa May found that when she went over to visit India not so long ago, and talking about bringing jobs back to the UK, and they were saying, sure, as long as we're getting freedom of movement, we'll start to talk about this. You know, you can't expect their expertise but not be willing to take their citizens. And I think that the UK have to realise that and start to think about things seriously, as opposed to this Jacob Rees-Mogg, as you say, Empire 2 fantasy that they're living in.
And on top of that, how about a foreign secretary that doesn't go to Myanmar and start singing The Road to Mandalay in front of people? How about having a foreign policy which means that we recognise that for many people in who have lived in the former colonies, the pictures of their relatives and ancestors being hanged as insurgents when all they wanted was not to be effectively enslaved, that's etched vividly in people's memories.
And it's not that long ago.
It's not that long ago. It's a generation or two ago for many people. I don't think people realise how Britain's star is potentially on the wane, and we're doing it to ourselves. Britain, before Brexit started, was the 5th richest trading nation in the world, And I think we're in for a really big shock.
James, your
Yes.
story of the week.
Well, it kind of leads on from that, I suppose, in terms of the Empire, and it's the news this week about the death of Winnie Mandela. And Winnie Mandela was clearly, and I'm no expert on her, but she was clearly a complex character. She was somebody who I had a great regard for in the early years and saw as a heroine of the movement, which she clearly was. I mean, she was the person who kept the spark alive when her husband was put into prison. Later on, some of the incidents that revolve
Absolutely.
around her were pretty shameful. When the Stompy incident where that poor young boy get killed, murdered by her supporters, with or without her consent or knowledge, is certainly a stain on her character. So she's a complex person. You can't say she was all good, she was all bad, she was a saint or she was a devil. Nobody can put themselves in her shoes until you've lived that sort of life. But there's no excusing some of her later behaviour. But at the same point, we should never forget the important role she had in making sure that there was freedom in South Africa, and if it hadn't been for her, I'm not sure that the Nelson Mandela legacy would have been able to continue to the point that it did.
Well, I think when I read these stories, I felt, James, that a lot of it was totally without nuance. I think I said to you earlier, and it was much the same. You know, if you look at the men in the Irish situation, and you look at McGuinness and Paisley, and you know, yeah, everybody could throw stones at their past, but there would not been peace in Northern Ireland if these men hadn't came to the table and put their own personal misery and pain and deaths of loved ones lost, etc., to one side. And it's the same with Winnie. I think, you know, she lived through hell. She did some very bad things, but she did some very good things. And people are not on one side. It needs nuance. And I found the reporting of her death to be either, you know, a eulogy, praising her, or else, you know, calling her every single name under the sun when no one has lived that life. She's an important character.
Just to talk about the lack of nuance, I had made a comment on the social media about what about Stompy, right? Something along those lines. And I got from Africans, South Africans, a fair amount of abuse. That's typical of you whites. And all I was doing was I was trying to put into context her life, you know, just it's not easy to do that through social media, but you know, I was just trying to say there was more than one side to it, and so there's a lack of context and a lack of nuance from both sides of this.
Absolutely.
And you know, history and time will tell.
Yeah.
You know, what will
But still an
decide what
important
it is. But we
character.
can't forget the things that happened towards the end, and but also by the same token, we have to remember what she did to keep the spark alive.
When we were reporting on the National, it was quite difficult to kind of encompass in one headline both those elements.
Yes.
Because if you went for one, then you were downplaying the other. And so, eventually in the front page, we just simply said William Mandela, and we put the 1936 to it. But even that, when we put the front page on Twitter, as we do every night, some guy said only the National could say something good about William Mandela, which
we didn't say anything about it. It was a factual.
We hadn't said anything about it, and actually, I think pretty much every newspaper had her on the front page the next day, and pretty much every one of them used a form of words that was quite, you know, wasn't positive and wasn't negative. It was kind of
She's an important woman in history, regardless, you know, however you view on what
Absolutely.
lens, she's an important woman in history.
I heard a very good documentary about her on Radio 4, talking to her biographer, who said that while you could never excuse the horrific things that were done with or without her knowledge, but by the football team, you know, the so-called football team, you also couldn't ignore the fact that this woman had spent time speaking to the South African agents whose job it had been to discredit Winnie Mandela. And she said that while it was undeniable that horrific things were done as part of the freedom movement, it was also, she said that she viewed Winnie Mandela in a much better way than she thought she was going to after she had spoken to the South Africans who had been instructed to discredit her.
I can understand.
My story of the week, slightly feminist agenda to it, that'll be a shock to all of you. It was brought to my attention from Engender. I send out a newsletter every Friday called Friday Feminist email letter, and if anyone who doesn't subscribe, I urge you to, but it was brought to my attention as things that I'm reading and things that have got a context, and brought to my attention from that was Sean Penn. Now he's a famous actor. There's some allegations of domestic abuse in his past, but certainly a powerful player in Hollywood, and he's released a book, and in that book he's wrote a poem criticising the Me Too movement and defending Charlie Rose and CK. So very difficult time where he criticises and talks about it, you know, in really harsh and disparaging words, and I thought really powerful men still, you know, criticising Me Too. So you know, when is it going to end? When, you know, we talk about Time's Up, we talk about Me Too, we're still talking about it. We've always been talking. We've been talking about it since I was a little girl. I you know, I was 8 the first time that a grown man, you know, revealed himself to me. All my friends have similar stories, and to hear someone so powerful denigrating a movement that's getting some traction, and finally young women are feeling that they've got the confidence to speak up and say enough. I find that quite horrific.
But the poem, not only would you criticise the poem for those reasons,
it's atrocious.
It's a really terrible poem, and there were excerpts from his book as well online this morning, and I think we were read a paragraph, and I think we would still be discussing right now what exactly that paragraph meant. It's dense.
I think he's as good an author as Morrissey. You know,
no, I think that's unfair to Morrissey. I know it's hard to be unfair to
Morrissey hasn't been good since his murder. But quite frankly,
he's writing his book. Oh my God.
The problem, one of the problems for me, is that you have younger men today who have no understanding of why Me Too is important, because they've been brought up by decent mums and dads who have got there's no way that these kids are going to understand what Me Too is about, because they wouldn't treat women the way in which we have grown up being treated. So
I disagree
but that's
entirely.
fine. You can disagree, that's fine. But so, for example, I'm not saying all young men, I'm saying that there are young men now who don't understand what this is about. But then you look at what Sean Penn is saying, and you look at the reality, and you have to say to these youngsters who say, why are all young men being tarnished, and say, because we still have this to deal with. If somebody as powerful as Sean Penn, who knows what's been happening...
I'm going to bring James in on this.
A couple of things I'd like to say. First one is on the point of young men being different or better. There's lots of great young kids out there. I mean, I meet them all the time. I'm the convener of education in the committee, but we still get regular reports of bullying and sexual harassment in our schools. And there was a recent report in newspapers about upskirting and
kids
stuff
are wearing
like
shorts,
that,
young girls are wearing
with
shorts
mobile
to
phones and stuff like that. So there clearly is tons of work to do. I always see the response or the reaction from males to this Me Too movement as being, funny enough, connected to the previous discussion, as being like the white South Africans to the freedom movement, where this is... People in power tend to see equality as being something being taken away from them, and when actually it's a necessary rebalancing of society. Absolutely. And I think that what we're seeing here, and what we should be seeing, and what we should all be after, is a rebalancing of society between men and women.
Absolutely.
Suzanne knows that I'm very supportive of all that sort of stuff. You know, and I'll do everything I can to make sure that it's an equal society on all fronts. We'll come on to that later on as part of the reason why I'm no longer standing. But I do think that there's this whole thing about people won't give away power easily.
Absolutely.
And what they're doing here is you've seen a backlash to a very, very powerful movement that's having a huge impact across the world.
I think privilege doesn't want to give away privilege in every single sphere. And I think that's what it comes right down to. So...
My story, very briefly, because we're running out of time, was the charging with sedition of the Barcelona former chief of police, Josep Trapero. But it just seemed to me a really underlining the kind of morally bankrupt case that the Spanish government is pursuing against politicians, and now a former chief of police who was widely praised for his reaction to the terrorist attack in Barcelona not so long ago, and indeed kind of insisted on having a softly approach in the referendum, despite orders to make sure that people didn't vote. So
he was protecting people, and he's being charged with
absolutely. And it still baffles me why we're not hearing a stronger outcry from EU leaders about what's going on in Spain, because it's
Franquism it seems to be alive and well. We said that, we touched on that last week.
Indeed, and we see Puigdemont now being freed because Germany has, it says, halted the extradition rather than cancelled it, but clearly I think the chances of him now being extradited from Germany to Spain are pretty much nil.
But that has been one of the tactics used by the Catalonian politicians very effectively. They've left the country so that it becomes an international point of principle.
That's right.
So we're going to move on now. Keep Scotland the brand. You started this a year ago after you were incensed. We're going to move on to a little video of Keep Scotland the brand first. So on with the video and then we'll have a chat.
Hi there folks, welcome back. I'm I for Scotland and today we're going to be talking to you about Keep Scotland the brand. If you didn't gather from our intro, Scottish produce is renowned worldwide for its quality, to the point where even our water receives praise. Keep Scotland the brand is a growing movement, currently gathering support all over Scotland, but particularly amongst communities which produce our food and drink. The group is highlighting the importance of our high quality Scottish produce being branded as such. You'll see in the picture above that strawberries grown in Kincardineshire have been slapped with British strawberries packaging. Now, before we get into further detail on this, we got in contact with the movement and can confirm that they do not endorse any form of boycotting. That is not the type of campaign they're leading. Their campaign is about engagement and supporting all of our agricultural industry. Keep Scotland the brand's goals dovetail neatly with the National Farmers Union, who published the picture document to address challenges that Scotland's agriculture sector will face post-Brexit. Inside the first few pages of the document, the National Farmers Union clearly outline their goals for the future, with giving consumers the choice to support Scottish and buy local with transparent origin and provenance labelling. This relates back to the British strawberries packaging we showed at the beginning, and indicates that it is not aligned with the National Farmers Union's plans for the future. The document builds on these ideas and their agriculture policy, and there are two specific areas we've highlighted to look at in a bit more detail. Firstly is that policy must reward the active, productive and efficient farmer and crofter. We want to incentivise innovation that will allow farming and crofting businesses to be dynamic, resilient and able to adapt to new opportunities. Naturally, this is a goal that all businesses and organisations should prioritise and pursue. While it may not be the only reward, a huge part of the reward is recognition for the blood, sweat and tears that go into producing food. This leads us into our next point, provenance. The superior quality and provenance of Scottish produce provides an opportunity to develop markets at home, in Europe and globally, adding significant value to local and national economies. Using bland British branding does our food and drink industry a disservice, as it ignores the diversity of the produce in not just Scotland but across the rest of the UK as well. Of course, we couldn't talk about food provenance and the agriculture industry without bringing up Brexit. Brexit threatens Scottish food and drink provenance for a few reasons. Scottish beef, Scottish lamb and Scotch whisky, to name a few, are set to lose their protected status after Brexit. This has already been seen with Peruvian government ministers demanding to be able to produce their own Scotch in return for a trading relationship post-Brexit. Of course, Peru can make whatever whisky they like, but Scotch whisky is currently a protected name and is renowned worldwide for its quality. The protected status stops imitations of the product that would dilute the reputation it has. This protected status is currently guaranteed by the EU, but no such guarantee is yet to come from the British government at Westminster for post-Brexit. On the 29th of March this year, the Scottish Government confirmed it would give a $250,000 boost to the promotion of local produce, while also announcing additional funding to support locally produced food and drink across Scotland. So, what can you do to help? Apart from sharing this completely professional video, which I promise was not in the slightest the result of a late night iron brew binging session, you can visit Keep Scotland the brand's website, as it has a full list of ways to get active and get involved. It's important to remember this campaign is about awareness and engagement, and a great way to engage is by buying locally, whether that be from a local butcher or a weekly farmers market. On the website there's also the opportunity to leaflet campaign, as well as download source material to talk with your friends and family about. It's crucial that this campaign doesn't encourage anyone to boycott, as it's often the retailer that specifies what goes on their own label, not the supplier. Boycotts are also seen as divisive, and if someone was going to lose their job because of a fall in sales due to a boycott, how likely are they going to be to support the campaign? This is a positive engagement campaign to support Scotland's food and drink industry. The loss of identity incurred from British branding impacts farmers from Wales, Northern Ireland and England as well. So support Scotland the brand, because we produce some of the best stuff in the world. Last but not least, we'd like to say a huge thank you to Ruth Watson of Keep Scotland the Brand. Ruth has been to meetings all over Scotland, raising awareness for the movement, and was an absolute star in pointing us to the right sources when we decided to do this video. Please support our excellent work. We've left a link to Keep Scotland the Brand in the description down below. And that's it for today, folks. We hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please share it with your friends and family.
So Ruth, you started Keep Scotland the Brand last October, I believe. What inspired you to do so?
Carrots. I went in.
What else?
I went in, being a good Scottish mum, I went in to get some carrots to make some soup. And it was that moment, that revelation where I looked and the carrots, they're Angus carrots, and they're grown literally from the fields around where I live. And suddenly they were being called British carrots, and they had a Union flag over them. Now,
in October was right about the first time you noticed that happening?
I'd noticed it before that. I'd noticed it with the fruit, strawberries from Kincardineshire being called British strawberries. I'd noticed it through the summer. It was growing.
But was that your tipping point, really?
That was the point where I sort of picked these carrots up, and I looked, and suddenly I realised I was surrounded by more bunting than a Jubilee celebration. and I thought, what is this? What's going on? And then I realised that more and more conversations I was having with it was, have you seen the flags and that? And talking to farmers, because I live in a farming community, and the farmers going, these are our carrots. What? The farmers don't like it. So I went on social media, and I did a bit of tippy tapping and posted about. They took a photograph and posted about these carrots. Now I've got a tiny wee Facebook page, a really insignificant little Facebook page. I got 30,000 responses to that posting. So that was when I thought,
Clearly
okay,
people feeling the same.
People feel the same. So let's test it out. And I spoke to a few people, and I spoke to a few farmers, and I spoke to a few industry leaders, because I'm the kind of person that phones up people and talks to them. And I knew about the Scotland the Brand campaign, which had been so successful, was the precursor to Scotland Food and Drink. So back in the 1990s through the early 2000s, and that's why I called it Keep Scotland the Brand.
The National picked up that campaign, and one of the criticisms that's levelled at the campaign, as it appears in the National anyway, from readers, or rather, let's just say not readers, but people who see it and say, isn't that a parochial attitude? Because, why are you obsessing about flags? Why are you obsessing about those issues, when really it's about whether or not farmers make a living?
So, to be honest, I'd be delighted if there were no flags on anything. I just want clear provenance. The National Farmers Union of Scotland, you read their literature, farmers want clear provenance. I've spoken to farmers whose personal politics will never align with mine, and they're telling me they have walked out of supermarkets in disgust when they see the packaging, because they want people to know where their food comes from, because clear provenance is good for business. Local provenance is good for global sales. Scotland's place in the market, in the domestic market and the global market, is important upon our brand identity. Our brand is Scotland. And if you were to try saying to a major burger chain, your brand's brilliant, it's working really good, let's just stick a crown on those two arches and see how you get on, they wouldn't go for it, because brand identity matters. And this isn't my campaign. I gave it a focal point, I gave it a voice, but it's Scotland's campaign. If people across Scotland weren't supporting this, if people weren't backing it, if industry leaders weren't backing it, I would just be a lone person raving in my kitchen about carrots. But this campaign has a movement, because people who work in the industry know that we are facing a potential crisis. We are facing the potential loss of hill farms across Scotland. I had an arable farmer, a farming representative, who said to me that he knows from conversations he has had in Whitehall Whitehall is prepared to let arable farming go because it is cheaper to import rather than support. Now, if you're talking about the primary function of any government being national security, you want to talk about national security. We had a few flakes of snow, and suddenly our supermarkets look like something out The Walking Dead. And you're trying to tell me that it's okay to have a nation which doesn't grow its own food to import from the Ukraine. You don't need to have nuclear weapons sitting up the Clyde. You just need a few people with clipboards stopping the food coming in, and suddenly we have a food emergency.
Because there's an attempt to frame this story really as a kind of nationalist story. Instead, I think, for me, it's a business story, because presumably when they launched Scotland the brand, they did so because there was a clear need for that, and there was a clear need to have a market identity that made people understand and trust that if these goods came from Scotland, therefore that was a kind of mark of quality. It wasn't a mark of moral superiority, it was a mark of quality.
James, sorry, I beg your pardon. James, what do you think? I mean, people can think about two things at once. People can care about how farmers get paid and the fact that there are flags on there. We can care about two things at once. But is this anything really? It's become this Scotland cringe. Anything where Scottish people are talking up the country, talking up our food, talking up our brands.
I think it's really interesting that the people who are saying, "What's all this fuss about flags for? Let's keep the Union Jack on it and that will solve the problem," don't really get it. Because the reality is it's not Scottish cringe, it's about trying to keep us down and trying to make us part of that union. And let's be honest, outside of Scotland, if people see the Union Jack, they think it comes from England.
Yeah.
And that's the reality, and that's the frightening thing about this. If people see the Union Jack, they won't think it's from Aberdeenshire or wherever it may be, they'll think it's from somewhere down south.
But this is an issue also for, I'm speaking to farmers and food producers in Cornwall, in Norfolk, in Lancashire, who are concerned about this. They don't want the loss of their brand either, because so
it's all over the islands.
It's all over. It's happening all over. So PGI, Protected Geographic Indicator, that is crucial. That's as close as you're going to get for a patent on food. So when the apple farmers in Suffolk, Somerset, heard this was happening, when the hill farmers in Wales heard this was happening, they were horrified. Norfolk turkey farmers, this is bad for business across. It's bad for business across the four nations, and this is a DEFRA campaign. DEFRA launched their Great British Campaign. DEFRA has no authority in Scotland apart from anything else. So
for viewers, what is DEFRA?
The DEFRA is the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, off the top of my head.
Well done.
Well done. I hadn't heard that before. For myself, the thing that pushed me towards Keep Scotland the brand towards you was the whiskey. I'm in the drinks industry as well, and when I see whiskey with a Union Jack wrapped round it, I just apoplectic. I'm like a cartoon,
Okay, but okay. So the apoplectic exploding head cartoon. That's that's the visceral reaction for some people. For other people, this comes down to the fact that in July of last year, the Americans, in October, the Peruvians said as part of the trade deal with Liam Fox, they want the right to call their whiskey Scotch. So this is not about flags. This is about the viability of our industry. When MEPs start tweeting about how brilliant this potential deal with Australia, our new Commonwealth business orientation is going to be, what happens during the transition deal? That just means that we can trade with Europe. What happens in March 2019, which many people do not realise, all our rights go. The transition toddles along, but the rights we have in Europe go, the protections we have in Europe go. If we do not sort out this branding issue before March 2019, we lose PGI. That means a farmer in Australia can export a side of Aberdeen Angus meat and call that Scotch beef. And what does that do to our Scottish farmers? And on top of all of that, as if that's not bad enough, what you end up with is all of our trade. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. No. So Pete Wishart has managed, he chairs the Scottish Select Committee. He has managed to get branding onto a Scottish Select Committee debate on trade and negotiations and Brexit. And I would urge everybody, I've been tweeting this far and wide, there is a link that you can put submissions. They're looking for submissions. This affects everyone. This affects a granny on the 18th floor who wants to make sure she's feeding her kids, her grandkids, decent food that has value across and standards. It affects the entrepreneurs who lose their branding. It affects the politicians. We should be getting in touch with every politician, a cross-party approach, and saying, get in touch, write a submission. Every trade industry board should be doing this.
Okay, well, what we'll do after the show, we always tweet links, who's on, so we'll make sure that link's tweeted out, so everybody that's following the show can follow Ruth and Keep Scotland the Brand and can see this link, and we would urge everybody to get involved, to have your say. It is hugely important.
And keep Scotland the brand.
Keep Scotland the brand.
Absolutely.
Without further ado, we've got the very talented indeed Tommy McGuire, fabulous name, singing Nowadays. Take it away, Tommy.
They told me rock and roll would never die. That was old Neil. I hope he has in light. In a world full of plastic faces, we don't seem to be going places, but that's how it works out nowadays. I got to running when I fell. Someone stopped me, I knew him very well. While we're touching, I'm sitting waiting, and I owe it all to you. Daddy told me, don't wear those silly clothes. My mama let me go out and find my soul. A mirror image, standing face to face. A man without care, a loving embrace. While we're touching, I'm sitting waiting, and I owe it all to you. You become what you're afraid of, depending on what you're made of. It's all in the way you keep yourself safe. Oh, you become what you're afraid of, depending on what you're made of. It's all in the way you keep yourself sane. While we're touching, I'm sitting waiting, and I owe it all to you. While we're touching, I'm sitting waiting, and I owe it all to you.
Thank you very much.
Fantastic, thanks very much. We'll hear a wee bit more from Tommy towards the end of the show. We're going to turn now to James Dornan. Was up until today a candidate for the deputy leadership from the SNP. Sadly, or happily, maybe I'll let him talk in his own words, but sadly for me anyway, he has removed himself from the race. So, James, what's happening? What's going on?
Well, I decided that I had to be deputy leader of the party would have been a fantastic honour. To take it seriously would have involved an awful lot of work, an awful lot of commitment, an awful lot of time, both physically and emotionally. I decided just recently, after talking to people who I consider close friends and colleagues, that I would rather spend that time fighting something that I feel very passionately about, and that's the fight against sectarianism in Scotland. I have recently Everybody knows that I'm prominent in defending the Offensive Behaviour Act. That's now fallen. I have still on the books a proposal for strict liability, but I've come to the conclusion that it's a bigger issue than that, that it's a societal issue. Well, I've always known it was a societal issue. Those who voted against offensive behaviour cannot pretend that football doesn't have a special place in that, but it is a societal issue. And I've decided that what I want to do is I want to take the fight against sectarianism to every part of Scotland, and I want to make sure that all those who think that sexist language, racist language, homophobic language is completely unacceptable come to the conclusion that sectarian language is exactly the same way. It's viewed in exactly the same way, and it's not in Scotland. I have had, over the last couple of months, and particularly over the last couple of weeks, some of the most vile abuse on social media and email and other ways, including threatening violence against me and all that sort of thing. I don't mind that, but what it did is it opened up a window to something I thought had gone to a great extent.
We talked about it last week on the show, about that email I'd noticed and what had happened to you.
Yeah.
Because Richard's story of the week last week was about Tom Devine had said he thought sectarian was, and a lot of respect for Tom Devine, but I couldn't agree more. I couldn't disagree more with him. I think it's very much alive and well. So certainly I couldn't agree more with you that that's a very, very important.
We have to, before anybody jumps on, and I don't mean anybody here, but I mean anybody out there jumps on this and says, "Yep, I agree. Let's go and get them." This is not about let's go and get them. This is about everybody, right? We all, including politicians, have to be very careful of the language we use. We use throwaway words that can have an impact if they're used in certain connotations. Now, I'm not saying that words should be banned. I'm saying that, you know, it's all about how they're used. It's the context in which they're used, and they're used far too easily and far too readily in derogatory context and trying to bring people down. So that is the main reason why, no, it's not the main reason, it's the reason why I've decided to step out the race. Although I wouldn't have stepped out the race if I wasn't happy with the candidates that were still in. And I am delighted with the 3 candidates that are still in. I think that whoever wins it, the party will be very fortunate to have them as Depute Leader. Before I get emails from pedants in the party saying, "You've got it wrong, James." Depute Leader. But I decided after...
Hamish sharpening his pencil there. Literally, as you were speaking.
Yeah, I decided after a great deal of thought and consideration that I am going to support Julie Hepburn. Julie has... They all have great qualities. Keith has proven himself. There's no arguing about the qualities that Keith has. He has a platform to use those qualities to help the government, to help the country, and to help the fight for independence. Chris will continue to do what he's been doing very well at a local level, and he will continue to give that voice from the left. His politics are very similar to mine, and I really wish him all the best in this contest. And again, if he won it,
he's a rising star in the party, there's no denying.
Yeah, but for me, Julie's the one. I've known Julie a long time. I've worked with her a long time. She's great at getting on with people. She's great at getting people to do things, and she is so organised and has a plan, and she knows what she thinks the party needs, and she will take people with her to achieve that. So therefore, I'm coming out in support of Julie, and we'll give her, you know, any backing that she requires. Can I just say before I let other people in that I just want to put in the record a huge thanks to everybody who has already endorsed me and nominated me. I've had support from all across the country from people, and you've no idea how grateful that has made me feel. And I hope that they'll forgive me for stepping out the race, but I just don't think I could have done them justice and taken on something that I have been fighting against for 40 years or so. And I think now's the opportunity for me to take the fight against sectarianism out there, and along with hopefully the good stuff that comes from the Brackadale report, just push that on and try and get to the state where Scotland is a country where we don't have to put up with the nonsense we've had to put up with.
It's a very honourable fight, I have to say.
If we could go back to the Tom Devine article, which was in the Sunday Herald last week, which he argued that sectarianism was, to all intents and purposes, over.
What planet is he living in?
Well, I think his definition of sectarianism was maybe specifically about prejudice against Catholics. Yeah. In a context of employment, yeah. And at one stage, Catholics couldn't get jobs in certain places, and now that's no longer the case.
Well, it's not that long ago really not that long ago. I mean, there's people who are watching this. There'll be people watching this programme who were alive when Catholics didn't have the vote and all that. It's not that long ago. So that certainly doesn't. But I think I got the impression that was.
I think so. But your question was what planet sounds. So presumably, with your experience of this is not the same as Tom Devine's.
I was very lucky in that I grew up in Edinburgh, and I could just finish that sentence there. But
you could. I think we've locked the doors. So you have to be very careful about what you say here.
Come on then.
She's a token Ouija anyway.
I think Glasgow Edinburgh fighting is even worse.
So
morning Tucker Calvin.
So when I was working in the BBC back in the days, it was something I was proud of. I was doing a programme, a phone-in programme, talking about the Orange Marches, and we were having and the Connolly Marches as well. Mm-hmm. So we were being fair about it, because back in the day the BBC was fair about these things, and we were doing research, and we were getting people from both sides to come and talk about the marching, because both sides want to do the marches, and it was something from Edinburgh I couldn't really get my head around. And I said to one of my colleagues, could you please call the Orange Lodge up and see if you could get their Head Oompa Loompa, whatever it's called, on. And my colleagues looked at me and laughed and said, we can't ask him to make that phone call. And I said, why not? And they said, his name's John Paul. And I said, I don't get it, why? And they said, you're from Edinburgh. And they said, John Paul is obviously a Roman Catholic name. And I went, on what planet? But apparently, and then, because I was living in Glasgow at the time, I lived near Maryhill, and I went out to witness an Orange March. And I don't know, I've never seen a march from the other side, so I don't know what those are like. And so for fairness, I don't know. But I was horrified. I was absolutely horrified by the triumphalism, the twisted, this is kind of the twisted, people's faces contorting as they were shouting at people as they were walking through their home streets, and you're thinking, what's going on? At what point is any of this healthy or wholesome? Also, this is not a celebration. This is not a celebration of a culture. This is
denigration of another culture.
It's another form of colonialism, and we must never forget that Ireland was always considered Queen Elizabeth's, the first colony of England. Yeah. It was Queen Elizabeth's colony, and it has continued, and there's that. I think actually this brings us back full circle. In a post-colonialist world, as we're looking for this new empire after the Commonwealth and over the Commonwealth after Brexit, we have to address the fact that sectarianism is a form of prejudice and a blight in every community that it affects. And I am horrified and disgusted that anybody can consider it not on a par with racism.
But James, it's not as widespread as it was.
No, I'm of an age where what you said was true, where you couldn't get jobs in certain large firms in Scotland and Glasgow. I mean, our biggest employer, I won't name them, but everybody was about my area would know who I was talking about, didn't hire Catholics. When I was 15, so that would be 68, right? And a friend of mine got in there because he had an uncle who was a Protestant who worked in there, and he was the first Catholic apprentice that I knew that worked in there. So things have changed hugely, and I mean, Glasgow City Council has had Catholic Lord Provost, all that sort of thing. So we've moved away from that. But I think they're less in number, Richard, but I think there's fringes now that are more bitter than I have seen them for a long, long, long time, if ever. And that's what we have to defend.
Talking about going back to this colonial thing again, the Act of Succession, it's right at the very, very top. It is literally written into the Constitution, as it were, So if it's written down in law and comes from the very top, then clearly it's not.
Yeah, although I don't want this to be seen as being a pro-Catholic thing. No, I want this to be seen about every single aspect. I mean, you talked, Ruth, about the Orange Walks. My ideal Scotland would be where everybody could celebrate an Orange Walk because it was about celebrating the culture
the positive.
Right, you know, and there is a positive Ulster Scots culture, but that's not what Orange Walks do. No matter what they may well tell you, that is not what Orange Walks do. It's exactly as Suzanne said, it's about the denigration of another culture. It's about our superiority. And, you know, I would like to see a time where what it is walks of all distinctions are about, look, this is who we are, we're proud of it, doesn't mean we're better than you. We're not there yet.
It should be, you know, Bastille Day, if you're French in Scotland, you should be able to hang out your French flag and, you know, and bring out some red wine, cheese, invite some pals round for a party. It should be the case.
Guillotines and stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe not so much guillotines.
I was thinking liberty, equality,
Sorry,
fraternity,
well,
but, you know,
yeah.
take it straight to guillotines. But it should be, but it is the only country in the world as well where, you know, it is seen as a taunt if on St Patrick's Day in the west of Scotland, if people put out the Irish
My
flag,
birthday,
it
may I
seems,
Yes.
What is it about now? Why now have you thought, right, I need to concentrate on this? Because clearly you didn't think that when you decided to run for deputy.
No, I think it was the last 2 weeks. That I've been getting abuse ever since I started to defend the offensive behaviour. Now, the Offensive Behaviour Act was not perfect, and I never claimed it was, but it was a serious attempt at trying to deal with an issue that we have in Scotland. Then, when that was scrapped, there was a couple of things happened. There was that Union Bears thing that I drew to the attention of others.
What was that thing?
There was a flyer went out which appeared to show a Rangers fan kicking a Celtic fan in the head, and that they were going to walk, wear dark colours, you know, let's see if we can, we might come into these, catch these Fenians and all that sort of stuff. Really offensive stuff. So I put that out there. I got lots of abuse, and what I always get, it doesn't matter, I get it from both sides, right? Because I do try, neither side who listen to this is going to believe this, but I do try to be even-handed. If I see something that's wrong at a Celtic match, I'll tweet and say, why are they singing about this? This is football, not, you know, this is not a Republican club or something like that, and the same thing on the other side. But the last 2 weeks has been just one thing after another, the level of visceral hatred, and I made a mistake and followed a link to a website, and there's 7 pages of tweets of abuse about me. 7 pages of tweets of abuse about me, and, you know, some threats and stuff like that. And I thought, if people, and it's not about me, you know, them threatening me, it's about if people are still thinking like that, we've still got tons of work to do.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
and that's the reason. And I couldn't do both. I just couldn't do both, because this is going to take up a lot of time. We're going to look at, I'm going to hopefully speak to everybody that's involved in this, from the police to the churches to the schools, everybody, to see if there's some way that we can combat this.
Well, there's an interesting tie-up as well. I know irregular viewers will forgive me, but there is a tie-up as well. Everybody, it's not unknown there's a tie-up with domestic abuse, with sectarian behaviour. And a lot of the women's organisations have done projects, so you and I can maybe have a wee chat later. But the Women's Library have done a big project, Colours and Gender have done a big project, lots of prominent feminists have wrote about domestic abuse and how sectarianism ties in, and toxic masculinity, I suppose you have to bring into it. And they all tie up, and it is absolutely both sides. It's not just a Rangers fan. We cannot, the very fact is in the West of Scotland, we cannot talk about sectarianism without bringing football into it. It's impossible.
Well, if you do, you're kidding.
You're kidding yourself on. And well, like, obviously a lot of people I've heard say, a lot of people had problems with the Offensive Behaviours Act, but it was better than nothing. You know, it could have been changed, fixed, open to debate.
It was better than nothing, but it was dealing with a problem, and it was bringing the problem to the attention of the public in a way that it possibly wasn't for those that didn't pay that much attention to football. And it showed that the Scottish Government and the Scottish society, because despite what we heard from some of the opponents, the offensive behaviour was popular with the public, because most of the public are not obsessed football fans. Most of the public are people that want to go about their daily lives.
How do you know that?
Because there's been the opinion polls done, and the opinion polls that we did showed exactly that. Now, James Kelly had in his consultation an opinion poll that showed otherwise.
James Kelly is?
He's the MSP he's a list MSP. Who brought forward the act that repealed the bill. Right, sorry, my apologies. And he had an opinion poll that was done as part of his consultation that showed blight. the people in favour of the repeal. But of course, the people who responded to that were people who were automatically in favour of his bill to a great extent. But any other independent polling has shown that the public were in favour of actions to be taken against them. And I have to remind James Kelly, just in case he's watching, that when the trouble started round about the time of that game and when Neil Lennon was getting these bomb threats and stuff like that, James Kelly in the Parliament says something legislative must be done to combat this.
The very fact that people can use the word Fenian and not face criminal charges for abusive language, I think is an issue. Because I remember I grew up in a multiracial family. My dad, my grandfather was a Church of Ireland minister. My aunt had to leave Ireland because she, as a Protestant, married a Roman Catholic and they were getting death threats. I've grown up in a house which is multiracial and has marriages across the religious divide from Ireland and Scotland.
Yeah.
I grew up listening to relatives, close relatives, being abused with words I will not say because of their colour. Those words now are not legal.
That's right.
The word Fenian should not be a legal, should not legally be allowed as a term of use. And one of the things which worries me about Brexit is the fact that many of these benefits you're talking about, many of the fact that I remember when the first Roman Catholic was able to sign for Rangers, and it was a the first.
So do I.
And the first
I was
Protestant went.
Mo Johnson.
No.
Only because he was a good player, not because of the rest of it.
Okay, but the fact is that now in Glasgow you can have Roman Catholics and Protestants sitting down together, and they don't care about what their background is. And a lot of that, I believe, has come down to European legislation against discrimination. And as we leave Brexit, I think we are watching the monsters crawling out from under the rocks because they see their dark day coming back.
I kind of hope it's the other way, and I hope this is... I get what you're saying, and to some extent I'm scared of what you say. I hope it's the dying throes, the last roar of a dinosaur before it disappears. But we have to make sure that it dies, so we have to keep on fighting it.
What would you say to somebody who would suggest to you that there have been many initiatives, and you talked about some of the ones that women's organisations are doing, there have been initiatives by the football clubs themselves, there have been initiatives by lots of organisations, and yet you still believe that sectarianism is a force. What are you going to do that all those people haven't done before?
I think there's a couple of things. One is that the time is right. Mm-hmm. We've started to take every one of these one by one, and I mean the Me Too that we were talking about earlier on is a much bit wider issue than sectarianism. Sectarianism is almost like a local issue, I mean, even if we're just talking about it in Scotland. So I think if we can just engender the same enthusiasm. I've got people looking just now at how we got to the position where Me Too worked, and how we got to the position that some of the languages around race and homophobia were no longer acceptable. And the media has to play its role, society has to take responsibility, organisations have to take responsibility for what happens within their premises, and that includes football clubs. And together we have to change the culture and just say this is not... It used to be okay to drink and drive. It used to be okay not to wear a helmet, no seatbelt, all that sort of stuff.
In the old days, if the police took a wife back to her husband, they would tell him to physically discipline her. Because in the old days, a man was legally responsible for his wife's crimes and could be said. A lot has changed in just 100 years.
Exactly, and so I think the time's right for that.
Very briefly, so what's the first thing you're going to do? What's the first thing you're going to do to sort of make your mark on this issue?
The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be contacting some media outlets, obviously just now, about the fact that I'm stepping down, but along with the statement will be the reason why, and I want that to start the debate, and I want that to start the interest growing. But I've got a small team working with me just now. I'm hoping I'll get more support round about it, and then I'll be looking at the best way, which may well include legislation, but the best way to move this forward to a point where the sort of language that we've heard far too often for far too long is no longer acceptable, and people don't get the sort of threats, or people don't think it's okay to say the things on the internet that they're saying just now.
I hope so.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you to both our guests today. Thank you for watching. We're going to end today's show with some more music from Tommy McGuire. I don't know if you could tell us a bit about this song, Tommy.
This song is called Baby Don't Worry. I released it on a kind of single format last year. It's on iTunes, it's on Spotify, and you can just find it under Tommy McGuire, Baby Don't Worry. So feel free to sing along if you pick it up at all.
You don't want that.
Tommy, don't worry.
Whoa, whoa, it goes like, whoa, whoa. Woke up this morning, I was back in my bed. Went outside to clear out my head. Back to the start, still moving on. All of my mind and all of my being went into you, and now we are in seeing. Oh no, no, baby, don't you worry now. We can't see into the future. And baby, don't worry, I see better things down the past. It goes like, whoa, whoa, it goes like, whoa, whoa. I worked for 4 days to clear out my home, boxed up my crowd, then I sat on my throne. Is this the way I wanted it to be? Well, I don't know, but I guess we'll see. Yeah, oh baby, don't you worry now. We can't see into the future. And baby, don't worry, I see better things than the past. It goes like, whoa, whoa, it goes like, whoa, whoa. Oh no, no, baby, don't you worry now. We can't see into the future. And baby, don't worry, I see better things than the past.
Hello, my name is Richard Walker. A healthy democracy needs a healthy... Good morning, welcome to Full Scottish, an hour-long programme. Hello, my name is Richard Walker. A healthy democracy needs a healthy, diverse broadcasting media. Broadcasting Scotland is one company attempting to bring that diversity to the screens. So far, Broadcasting Scotland produces a full Scottish programme every Sunday morning, and Here and Now, a music programme. It's also trialled a Scotland at 7 news programme, which we hope to put on every night at 7 o'clock. But to make these programmes, and to reach our ambition of producing 35 hours of broadcasting every week, We desperately need your support. If you visit our website at broadcastingscotland.scot, you'll find all the information you need to know about our company and ways in which you can become a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. The more you support us, the more programmes we can make, the more diverse our media becomes. Thank you.